I'm Wilhelmina Sinclair, 78 years old, a woman, and my only son tried to steal my $10 million lottery winnings to give to his spoiled daughter. He wasn't just my son, he was my heart, the living memory of the love I shared with my late husband, Arthur, or so I thought. It turns out a heart can be a treacherous thing and a memory can be a liar. For 55 years, I loved Robert. For 55 years, I poured my soul into raising a good man. It took $10 million to show me I had raised a stranger. My house is quiet now. It wasn't always this way. When Arthur was alive, this old house was filled with the sound of his booming laugh and the smell of his pipe tobacco. After he passed, the silence that moved in was a heavy, mournful thing. But my son, Robert, his wife Sheila, and their daughter Tiffany, they would occasionally break that silence. Not with the joyful noise of a loving family, but with the sharp, demanding clang of need. Their visits were like clockwork, timed perfectly to when a bill was due or a new desire had taken root in my granddaughter's heart. I should have seen the signs. Lord knows they were there, plain as the nose on my face. I remember Tiffany's 16th birthday. I had spent a week baking her favorite cake, a 7-layer caramel that my own mother had taught me to make. I'd used the best butter, the finest sugar, and poured love into every stir of the spoon. When I presented it to her, she barely glanced at it. Her eyes were fixed on a small velvet box in her father's hand. Inside was a key. A key to a brand new convertible sitting in the driveway with a bow on it that was bigger than my whole torso. Robert and Sheila had taken out a second mortgage for that car. I remember the look on Robert's face when he looked at me, a mixture of pride and defiance. Only the best for my little girl, Mom, he'd said. My cake sat on the table untouched. That night I ate a slice alone in my kitchen and it tasted like ash. Another time, about a year before everything fell apart, Robert called me in a panic. His voice was tight with a stress I knew all too well. Mom, we're in a bit of a bind. The property taxes are due, and with Tiffany's tuition, we're just stretched so thin. I didn't hesitate. I went down to the bank the next morning and took out a significant portion of my savings, money Arthur and I had painstakingly put away for my own old age. I gave it to him without a second thought. Family helps family, Arthur always said. 2 weeks later, Sheila posted photos on social media. She and Tiffany were on a spontaneous mother-daughter spa retreat in Arizona. They were wearing plush white robes, sipping champagne, their faces aglow with expensive treatments. My money, my security, had paid for their cucumber eye masks and hot stone massages. When I gently brought it up to Robert, he got defensive. Mom, Sheila was stressed. You don't know the pressure she's under. We were going to pay you back. They never did. But the clearest sign, the one that haunts me the most, was the way they treated my home. To me, this house is a sacred place. Every scuff on the floorboards, every chipped teacup tells a story of my life with Arthur. To them, it was just an old house, a collection of assets. Sheila was always talking about unlocking the equity. Wilhelmina, she'd say, her voice dripping with fake concern, this big old place is too much for you. You should sell it and move into a nice, modern condo. Think of the freedom. My granddaughter Tiffany was even worse. Grandma, this furniture is so dated, she'd whine, running her manicured finger through the dust on Arthur's old mahogany desk. You could get so much for these antiques and buy stuff that's actually stylish. They didn't see a home, they saw a price tag. They didn't see me, they saw a gatekeeper to things they wanted. I was a fool, a loving, hopeful fool. I chose to see the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap, not the greedy man he had become. I chose to see the daughter-in-law I had welcomed with open arms, not the calculating woman who was sizing up my possessions. I made excuses for them. I told myself that they were just products of a different time, a world that taught them that what you have is more important than who you are. I loved them. And that love was a blindfold I tied around my own eyes, tight and secure. It would take a miracle to rip it off. And that miracle, ironically, came in the form of a $1 lottery ticket. It was a Tuesday, the day I do my weekly grocery shopping. It was a ritual Arthur and I had started 40 years ago, and one I kept up after he was gone. It gave my week a little structure, a little purpose. That particular Tuesday was gray and drizzly, the kind of day that makes your bones ache. I was at the checkout counting out my coupons when the young man behind the counter said, "The jackpot's up to 10 million tonight, ma'am, feeling lucky." I chuckled so. And at my age, I'm lucky to wake up every morning. But then, for a reason I still can't explain, something nudged me. Maybe it was the memory of Arthur, who always bought a ticket when the jackpot got big, just for the fun of it, he'd say. I found a dollar bill in the bottom of my purse, one I'd been saving for a rainy day, and I suppose this qualified. Oh, why not? I said. Give me one of those quick picks. I stuffed the little slip of paper into my coat pocket and didn't think another thing about it. I went home, put away my groceries, ate a simple dinner of soup and toast, and fell asleep in my armchair watching the evening news. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee and reading the paper when my eyes drifted to the lottery numbers. It was a habit, nothing more. I'd glance at them, see that none matched, and toss the ticket. I pulled the slip from my coat pocket. The first number was 4. I looked at the paper, for a little flutter in my chest. The second number was 12, paper 12. My hand started to shake just a little. 21, paper 21. I put my coffee cup down. It was making a clattering sound against the saucer. 33, paper 33. Now my breath was catching in my throat. This couldn't be right. I must be reading it wrong. My old eyes must be playing tricks on me. 47, paper 47. My heart was a drum against my ribs, loud and frantic. I leaned in close, my nose almost touching the newsprint. The last number on my ticket was 52. The final number in the paper was 52. I sat there for a long time just staring, the ticket in one hand, the newspaper in the other. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis. $10 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. It was an abstraction, a string of zeros that had no meaning in my life of careful budgets and coupon clipping. I checked the numbers again and a fifth time. I even went to my computer, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard, and pulled up the official lottery website. The numbers blinked back at me from the screen, solid and undeniable. My first thought was of Arthur. He would have grabbed me by the waist and danced me around this kitchen, his laugh shaking the whole house. My second thought was of Robert. I had to tell my son, this money, it would change everything for him. He wouldn't have to worry about property taxes or tuition anymore. Tiffany could have anything she wanted. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me. This wasn't just my luck, it was our luck. It was a gift from God to our family. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling so much I had to dial twice. Robert, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mom, what's wrong? You sound strange. Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything is wonderful. I started to cry then, tears of shock and happiness. Robert, you're not going to believe this. I won the lottery. There was silence on the other end of the line. What are you talking about? The lottery, last night's jackpot, $10 million. More silence, then are you serious? Mom, are you absolutely sure? I'm sure, Robert. I've checked the numbers a dozen times. I heard muffled shouting in the background. It was Sheila. What is it? What's she saying? Then Robert's voice, sharp and electric. She won, Mom won the lottery. The phone was suddenly snatched away. Wilhelmina, is this true? Sheila's voice was a high-pitched squeal. And it's true, Sheila. Oh my God, Robert, Tiffany, get in here, Grandma won the lottery. Less than an hour later, they were on my doorstep. It was the fastest they had ever gotten to my house. They burst in, a whirlwind of excitement and frantic energy. Tiffany was screaming and jumping up and down. Sheila was hugging me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. Robert just stood there for a second, his eyes wide, a strange, calculating look on his face that I mistook for awe. $10 million, he kept saying, shaking his head. Mom, do you have any idea what this means? It means our worries are over, I said, my heart swelling with love for them, all of our worries. This is it, Tiffany, Sheila shrieked, grabbing her daughter's hands. That business idea you had, the boutique, we can do it. We can get the best location, the best inventory. And my car, Tiffany squealed. My lease is almost up. I can get that new Tesla, the one with the doors that go up. They talked for hours, their voices overlapping in a dizzying cascade of plans and desires. A new house for them in a gated community, a European vacation, a whole new wardrobe for Tiffany. They spun a future made of gold and diamonds, a future I was apparently going to finance. I just sat there smiling and nodding, caught up in their joy. It felt good to be the source of so much happiness. In that moment, I was more than just their old mother, their quiet grandmother. I was a miracle worker. I was their savior. I didn't realize that what they really saw me as was a bank, and the first withdrawal was about to be made. The first few days were a blur of champagne and dreams. My quiet house was suddenly Grand Central Station. Robert took charge of the official process, driving me down to the Lottery Commission headquarters. The cameras flashed, a man in a suit handed me a giant check, and I smiled until my face hurt. Sheila was right by my side, patting my arm, her eyes gleaming. "We're so proud of you, Wilhelmina," she cooed, loud enough for the reporters to hear. "She's always been the rock of our family." It was a beautiful performance. The money after the lump sum payout and taxes was still an astronomical figure. It sat in a new bank account, a number on a screen that made me feel dizzy every time I looked at it. Robert and Sheila insisted I shouldn't have to worry about a thing. "We'll handle it, Mom," Robert said, his tone full of a newfound authority. "You just relax, you've earned it." Their first move was to hire a financial advisor, a slick young man named Julian who Sheila knew through a friend at her country club. They brought him to my house. He wore a suit that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to be and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He spread a mountain of glossy brochures across my dining room table, the table where Arthur and I had shared thousands of meals. "Wilhelmina," Julian began, his voice smooth as silk, "an inheritance event of this magnitude requires a sophisticated strategy. We need to protect your assets and ensure generational wealth." I didn't know what half of those words meant. All I knew was that Robert and Sheila were nodding along to everything he said, their eyes wide with admiration. "The first thing we need to do," Julian continued, "is to set up a trust. It's the most secure way to manage the funds, especially for someone in your stage of life." That was the first little sting. In your stage of life, as if I were a child who couldn't be trusted with her own money, but Robert jumped in before I could protest. "It makes perfect sense, Mom. This way the money is protected for all of us, for Tiffany and for her children one day." The plan they laid out was simple. The money would go into a trust. Robert and Sheila would be the trustees, I would be the beneficiary. It all sounded so professional, so responsible. They assured me I would have access to anything I needed, but this structure would make investments and large transactions more efficient. But the real pressure began with Tiffany. Her dream of owning a boutique, once a flight of fancy, was now being discussed as a serious business venture. Night after night, they would sit in my living room, spreading out business plans and design sketches on my coffee table. "Look, Grandma," Tiffany would say, pointing to a drawing of a sleek, minimalist storefront. "This is what I want. It'll be called Tiffany S. It will be the most exclusive boutique in the city." Sheila would chime in, and we've found the perfect location. It's in that new luxury shopping district. The rent is steep, of course, but you have to spend money to make money, right? The startup cost they presented was $500,000. I nearly choked on my tea. $500,000, I repeated, my voice small. "Honey, that's an awful lot of money." Robert sighed, a theatrical put-upon sound. "Mom, this is an investment. It's an investment in your granddaughter's future. Don't you want to see her succeed? Don't you want to give her a head start in life?" "Of course I do, Robert, but—" "If she has a real vision, Wilhelmina," Sheila cut in, her voice sharp. "Tiffany has taste. This isn't just some whim, this is her passion." Every conversation became about money, my money. If I suggested a weekend trip to the coast, a simple pleasure I'd always dreamed of, they'd pivot. "That's a nice idea, Mom, but what we should really be doing is flying to Paris for Fashion Week to get inspiration for the boutique." If I mentioned wanting to donate to my church, which had been a cornerstone of my life for 50 years, Robert would frown. "We need to be careful with big donations right now, Mom. It can complicate the tax situation. Let's get Tiffany's business off the ground first. Charity begins at home, right?" They started to treat me like I was an inconvenience, a slow-witted old woman who couldn't grasp the brilliant future they were planning. One evening, I overheard Sheila on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was low and venomous. "I know," she was saying, "it's like talking to a brick wall. She's so set in her ways. She doesn't understand that this isn't just her money anymore. It's family money." My blood ran cold, not just her money anymore. The words echoed in the silence of my own home. I had become an obstacle to my own fortune. The breaking point was building, brick by painful brick. They wanted me to sell the house. The arguments became more forceful, less Chloe. A kid in fake concern. Mom, it's a no-brainer, Robert said one night, standing in the middle of my living room and gesturing around him as if it were a dilapidated shack. This place is a money pit, the upkeep, the taxes. If we sell it, we can invest that capital into something that will actually give us a return. And we'll find you a beautiful little apartment, all modern with a doorman and everything. You won't have to lift a finger. I don't want a doorman, I said, my voice trembling. I want my home, I want Arthur's home. Sheila scoffed, a short, ugly sound. Arthur is gone, Wilhelmina. You're living in the past. We're trying to build a future. They were chipping away at me piece by piece. They questioned my memory, my judgment, my ability to understand the world. They isolated me, making it clear that my old friends, my church community, wouldn't understand our new financial situation. It was just the four of us, they insisted. A tight family unit, but it felt less like a hug and more like a cage. And one evening, they came to me with a stack of papers and a pen, ready to lock the door for good. It was a Thursday night. They arrived together, which was unusual. They normally trickled in, but tonight they presented a united front. Robert was carrying a leather briefcase. Sheila's smile was stretched so tight across her face it looked like it might snap. Even Tiffany was there, looking uncharacteristically solemn, a role she had clearly been coached to play. Mom, Robert began, setting the briefcase on the dining room table with a heavy thud. We need to have a serious talk. They sat me down at the head of the table, the same spot Arthur used to occupy. Robert sat on my right, Sheila on my left, and Tiffany stood behind her mother, a silent, looming presence. It felt like an intervention or an ambush. Robert opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers, bound in a neat blue cover. He slid it across the polished wood towards me. Julian drew these up for us, he said. It's the paperwork for the trust we discussed, and a few other things to make managing the estate easier. Sheila leaned forward, placing her manicured hand over mine. Her skin was cold. It's just a formality, Wilhelmina. It puts everything in order, it protects you, it protects all of us. I looked down at the documents. The language was dense, a thicket of words like fiduciary, power of attorney, testamentary provisions. I felt a fog descend over my mind. I am not an uneducated woman, but this was a language I did not speak. It was the language of traps and loopholes. What is all this? I asked, my voice weak. It's the trust agreement, Robert explained, pointing to the first section. It officially names Sheila and me as trustees. He then flipped a few pages. And this, he said, his voice casual, too casual, is a durable power of attorney. It just gives me the ability to sign things on your behalf, handle banking, that sort of thing. It's for convenience, really. So you don't have to be bothered with every little transaction. So you don't have to be bothered. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. They weren't trying to help me, they were trying to erase me, to turn me into a ghost in my own life, a silent benefactor whose only job was to fund their dreams. I looked at my son's face, the face I had kissed goodnight 1,000 times, the face I had cooled with a damp cloth when he was sick with fever, and I saw a stranger. I saw the glint of greed in his eyes, the same avaricious gleam I saw in Sheila's. I looked at Tiffany and I saw a bottomless pit of want. My heart, which had been a drum, suddenly went still and cold. The blindfold of love didn't just rip, it incinerated. In its place was a clarity so sharp and painful it stole my breath. I saw everything, the untouched birthday cake, the spa vacation paid for with my savings, the desire to sell my home. It was all part of the same ugly tapestry, and this was the final thread. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the silent room with the force of a thunderclap. Sheila's hand flew back from mine as if she'd been burned. What? I said no, I repeated, my voice stronger now. I pushed the papers back across the table. I'm not signing anything. Robert's face darkened. The mask of the concerned son fell away, revealing the petulant, angry man underneath. Mom, don't be ridiculous. This is for your own good. You don't understand these things. Oh, I think I'm starting to understand things perfectly, I said, my gaze sweeping over the three of them. I understand that you see me as a walking bank account. I understand that you want to take control of my money, my home, my life. You don't want to manage my fortune, you want to steal it. The word steal detonated in the room. Tiffany gasped. Sheila's face contorted with rage. How dare you, she hissed. After everything we've done for you, we've been here every day helping you. Helping me? I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You've been helping yourselves. You've been circling me like vultures, waiting for me to die so you could pick my bones clean. Well, the lottery just sped up your timeline, didn't it? That's enough, Robert shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The papers jumped. You're being hysterical. You're an old woman. You're confused. I am not confused. I rose to my feet, my body shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in 50 years. I am your mother, this is my house, and this is my money, I won it, me, not you, not Sheila, not Tiffany and her ridiculous, overpriced boutique, and you will not bully me into giving it away. The ugly truth was finally out, writhing and venomous between us. There was no going back. Fine, Robert sneered, his face pale with anger. Be that way, be a selfish old woman. But don't come crying to us when you're all alone and some con artist cheats you out of every penny, because we won't be here to pick up the pieces. He stuffed the papers back into his briefcase, snapped it shut, and stormed towards the door. Sheila followed, but she paused to give me one last, withering look. You'll regret this, Wilhelmina. You'll die alone in this dusty old house, and you'll have deserved it. Tiffany, who hadn't said a word, just stared at me with cold, dead eyes before turning and following her parents out the door. The front door slammed shut, and the silence that rushed back in was different. It wasn't mournful anymore. It was absolute. It was the silence of total abandonment. I stood there in the dining room for a long time, my legs trembling. Then I sank back into my chair and finally, I wept. I wept for the son I had lost, or perhaps the son I had never truly had. I wept for my own foolishness, for the love I had given so freely to people who saw it only as a tool to be used against me. The $10 million felt like a curse. It had brought me nothing but the deepest sorrow I had ever known. I was rich, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The house was no longer a home, it was a gilded cage, and I was its only prisoner. That night was the lowest point of my life. The days that followed were a gray, formless fog. I didn't answer the phone, which rang incessantly for the first week with numbers I knew belonged to Robert or Sheila. Then the calls stopped. The silence they left behind was even worse. I drift from room to room in the big, empty house, a ghost haunted by memories that had turned sour. Every photograph of a smiling Robert was a mockery. Every gift they'd ever given me felt like a bribe. The money sat in the bank, a monstrous, paralyzing weight. I was terrified of it. Robert's words echoed in my head, some con artist will cheat you out of every penny. I started to see every stranger as a potential thief. The mailman, the grocery clerk, the person walking their dog past my house. Paranoia became my only companion. I barely ate, I didn't sleep. I was fading, disappearing into the floral wallpaper of my lonely prison. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into this self-imposed exile, I was sitting in Arthur's old armchair, staring at a water stain on the ceiling when the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made my hand reach for the receiver. Hello, my voice was a rusty croak. Willie, is that you? You sound terrible. The voice was deep, familiar, a sound from a better time. It was Marcus Thorne, my Arthur's best friend since they were boys, a retired accountant and the sharpest, most honest man I had ever known besides my husband. Tears instantly welled in my eyes. Marcus, I whispered. I've been calling Robert to see how you were, and he's been giving me the runaround, he said, his voice laced with suspicion. Said you were not feeling well and needed your rest. Willie, what's going on? You haven't been to church in weeks. The pastor is worried sick. And just like that, the dam broke. I told him everything. The lottery, the joy, the plans, the trust, the power of attorney, the ugly fight, the slamming door. The words poured out of me in a torrent of pain and humiliation. I didn't spare myself, confessing my own foolishness, my blindness. Marcus listened patiently without interruption. When I was finished, crying so hard I could barely speak, there was a long pause on the other end. That no-good, greedy son of a, he began, his voice a low growl before catching himself. Willie, I'm coming over right now, don't you move a muscle. An hour later, Marcus Thorne was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, a look of grim determination on his face. He was 75, but he had a fire in his eyes that could have shamed a man half his age. He made me a cup of strong, sweet tea, just the way Arthur used to. All right, he said after I'd calmed down a little. First things first, they didn't get you to sign anything, right? You're sure? I'm Sue. Ray, I said, the papers are gone. They took them when they left. Good, he nodded. That's the most important thing. The money is still yours and yours alone. He spent the next hour asking me sharp, precise questions about the bank, the account, the financial advisor, Julian. He took notes on a little pad he pulled from his coat pocket. This Julian character sounds like a shark, he muttered. The first thing we're going to do tomorrow morning is go to the bank. We are moving that money into a new account at a different bank, one that only you and God have access to. We're going to fire Mr. Slick Suit Julian. And we're going to hire a real lawyer, a bulldog I know, to make sure everything is ironclad. Just having a plan, any plan, felt like a life raft. A little spark of hope ignited in the cold darkness of my heart. Marcus, I don't know what to do, I confessed. This money, it feels like a curse. He reached across the table and patted my hand. His was warm and steady. Money isn't a curse or a blessing, Willie. It's a tool, it's an amplifier. It just makes people more of what they already are. It showed you that your son, bless his rotten heart, is a greedy fool. And it showed you that you, Wilhelmina Sinclair, are a survivor. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking. He made me tell him stories about Arthur. We laughed. For the first time in weeks, a real, genuine laugh escaped my lips. He stayed for dinner and I found myself pulling ingredients from the pantry. Without thinking, I started mixing the dough for my mother's famous sweet potato rolls. My hands knew the motions by heart. Kneading the dough, feeling it come to life under my palms was therapeutic. The familiar, comforting scent of yeast and cinnamon began to fill the kitchen, chasing away the stale smell of despair. Marcus watched me, a small smile on his face. You've always had a gift in the kitchen, Willie. Arthur used to say your baking could solve any problem in the world. I looked down at my flour-dusted hands. He was right. This was something I could do, something I understood. It was real and honest. You put in good ingredients and hard work, and you created something that brought people joy. There were no loopholes, no hidden clauses. An idea, small and fragile as a butterfly's wing, began to form in my mind. What if I could use this tool, this money, to build something? Something of my own. Something that had nothing to do with Robert or Sheila or Tiffany. Something that was born not of greed, but of passion. Marcus, I said, my voice filled with a new energy. What would you think if I told you I wanted to open a bakery? He looked at me, his eyes wide, then a slow grin spread across his face. Willie, he said, leaning back in his chair, I think that's the best damn idea I've ever heard. That was the turning point. In my own kitchen, surrounded by the smell of baking bread and the warmth of a true friend, I found my resolve. I was not going to fade away. I was not going to let them win. They wanted to see me as a weak old woman, a victim. I was about to show them and myself what Wilhelmina Sinclair was really made of. I was going to rise. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity, the likes of which I hadn't experienced since I was a young mother raising a rambunctious boy. Marcus was true to his word. He became my general, my confidant, my partner in crime. We marched into the bank, and with the help of his bulldog lawyer, a formidable woman named Ms. Albright, we secured every last penny of my winnings. We fired Julian with a letter so cold and professional it probably gave him frostbite. The sense of control, of taking back my own life, was intoxicating. Then we went hunting, not for deals or investments, but for a dream. I knew what I wanted, a small, neglected space I could pour my heart into. We found it on a street just a few blocks from my church, a corner storefront that had been boarded up for years. It was dusty and dilapidated, with peeling paint and cracked windows, but it had good bones and a large front window that caught the morning sun. While others saw urban decay, I saw potential. I saw a place for warm bread and friendly faces. I bought the building outright. The look on the real estate agent's face when I wrote the check was something I'll treasure forever. The renovation was a monumental task, but it filled my days with purpose. I was there every morning, a thermos of coffee in hand, conferring with contractors and designers. I didn't want a slick, modern place like the one Tiffany had designed. I wanted warmth. I wanted comfort. I chose reclaimed wood for the floors, warm brick for one of the walls, and big, comfortable armchairs for a little seating area by the window. I wanted it to feel like my kitchen, like a home. Marcus handled the business end, navigating the labyrinth of permits, licenses, and payroll. I handled the heart of the operation, the menu. I dug out my mother's and grandmother's old recipe boxes, their faded index cards filled with spidery cursive. I tested and retested every recipe, from the 7-layer caramel cake to the sweet potato rolls, from flaky buttermilk biscuits to a deep dish apple pie that would make you weep. My house, once a tomb of sorrow, was now constantly filled with the glorious scents of sugar, butter, and cinnamon. I needed staff, a new family. I didn't put out a formal ad. I put a notice up on the community board at my church. I hired a young single mother named Maria as my head baker, a woman whose passion for pastry was matched only by her fierce love for her 2 children. I hired a retired school teacher named George to run the front counter, a man with a gentle smile and a gift for remembering everyone's name. We were a motley crew, a collection of people who had been overlooked by the world in one way or another. Together, we were a team. The day we opened was nerve-wracking. We called it the Rising Loaf. Marcus thought it was perfect. "It's about the bread," he'd said, "and it's about you." We hung a simple, elegant sign above the door and opened for business on a crisp autumn morning. At first, it was just a trickle of curious neighbors and friends from church. But then the magic started to happen. Someone would buy a slice of my lemon pound cake and their eyes would light up. They'd tell a friend. That friend would come in for a cinnamon roll and tell their coworkers. Word of mouth is a powerful thing, more powerful than any fancy marketing campaign. Within a month, the Rising Loaf was a sensation. There were lines out the door on Saturday mornings. Local news reporters came to write stories about the 78-year-old woman who took her lottery winnings and built the coziest spot in the city. I was no longer Wilhelmina Sinclair, the lonely old woman. I was Willie, the owner of the Rising Loaf, the lady who baked with love. My life had a new rhythm. I was up before dawn, not out of anxiety but with anticipation. I'd spend my days covered in a light dusting of flour, laughing with Maria in the kitchen, chatting with George and our regulars at the counter. I knew their stories, their children's names, their little joys and sorrows. They became my family. The big, empty house didn't feel so empty anymore when I came home at night, tired but fulfilled, my heart full. This was a different kind of wealth, a richness of spirit and community that my son and his family could never comprehend. I had built something real, something that nourished people, body, and soul. I had never felt so free. About 6 months after the Rising Loaf opened, on a busy Friday afternoon, the bell above the door chimed, and a cold draft swept through the warm, fragrant air. I looked up from the batch of cookie dough I was mixing, and my heart stopped. Standing there just inside the door were Robert and Sheila. They looked diminished. The arrogance had been stripped away from them. Robert's expensive suit was rumpled and there were dark circles under his eyes. Sheila's perfectly coiffed hair was slightly askew and her face, without its usual mask of smug superiority, just looked tired and strained. They stood there awkwardly, like strangers in a foreign land, looking at the bustling cafe I had built. My cafe. George, my cashier, gave them a polite but wary smile. "Can I help you?" Robert cleared his throat. We're here to see my mother, Wilhelmina Sinclair." George's eyes flickered towards me. I wiped my hands on my apron, my heart a steady, slow beat, and walked out from behind the counter. The chatter in the cafe died down as people sensed the tension. "Robert, Sheila," I said. My voice was calm, even. The sight of them didn't ignite the old rage or the old pain. It was like looking at a photograph from a distant, almost forgotten part of my life. "Mom," Robert began, taking a step forward. "This place, it's incredible, we had no idea." "You look wonderful, Wilhelmina," Sheila added, her voice a pale imitation of its former syrupy tone. "I am wonderful," I replied simply. "What do you want?" The directness of the question seemed to throw them. Robert fumbled for words. We wanted to talk, to apologize. We were wrong, Mom, terribly wrong. We were greedy and stupid, and we let We let things get out of hand. We miss you, Sheila chimed in, trying to produce a tear. It didn't work. Her eyes remained dry and desperate. You don't miss me, I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the silent cafe. You miss my money, let's not pretend otherwise. Robert's face flushed with shame. The truth, spoken so plainly, had stripped him of his last defense. It's not just that, he mumbled, looking down at his expensive but scuffed shoes. Things have been difficult. The business I work for had layoffs. My position was eliminated. The credit cards are maxed out. We're going to lose the house, Mom. So there it was, the ill reason for their visit, not remorse, not love, desperation. They had come to the bank after all. Tiffany's boutique never happened, I take it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sheila shook her head, a flicker of the old resentment in her eyes. How could it? We didn't have the capital. I looked at my son, this 55-year-old man who had the world at his feet and squandered it on vanity and entitlement. I looked at his wife, who had poisoned him against his own mother. I felt a pang, not of anger, but of pity. What empty lives they led. You came here asking for a bailout, I stated. It wasn't a question. Robert finally met my eyes. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the little boy he used to be, lost, scared, and out of options. We're desperate, Mom, alone, just enough to get back on our feet. We'll pay you back, I swear it. I took a deep breath, the scent of baking bread filling my lungs. I looked around my bakery. I saw Maria, who was now able to afford a better apartment for her children. I saw George, who told me this job had saved him from a lonely retirement. I saw the faces of my customers, my friends, my community, my new family. Then I looked back at Robert and Sheila. Oh no, I said. The word was soft, but it was made of steel. Sheila gasped. After all we've been through, you'd let your own son, your only grandchild's future, go down the drain. I am not responsible for the consequences of your choices, I said, my voice clear and strong. You made your bed of greed and selfishness, and now you must lie in it. This money, I said, gesturing around the bakery, is busy. It's busy building something real. It's providing jobs. It's creating a place of warmth and community. It's funding scholarships for young people in this neighborhood who actually want to work for their future, not have it handed to them. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only they could hear. My love was never enough for you. You wanted my money, and when you tried to take it, you forfeited any claim you had to either one. My legacy will not be a spoiled granddaughter in a Tesla or a new house in a gated community. It will be this. It will be the rising loaf. It will be a testament to the fact that true wealth has nothing to do with the number of zeros in your bank account. I turned away from them then, a signal that the conversation was over. George, I said, my voice bright again, let's get a fresh batch of those lemon scones in the display case, shall we? I walked back to my kitchen without a second glance. I could feel their eyes on my back, a mixture of shock, hatred, and disbelief. A moment later, I heard the bell above the door chime one last time. They were gone. I leaned against the counter, took a deep, steadying breath, and smiled. I was free, utterly and completely free. The last chain had been broken. They say that money changes people, but I don't think that's true. I think money reveals who people truly are. My fortune revealed the greed in my son's heart, but it also revealed a strength in my own that I never knew I possessed. I learned that a family is not just about blood. It's about who stands by you, who lifts you up, and who loves you for who you are, not for what you have. I lost a son, but I gained a purpose. I gained a community. I gained myself. And that is a fortune no one can ever take away from me.